And what is AI?
AI is a buzzword now. We were looking at AI before ChatGPT. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize about it,
Is it making us lazy?
but whether or not it does, the ultimate goal of AI
Invade the whole world.
actually has some...
Are you paid by credit?
We'd spent 9 months programming on a computer, and then someone said, forget everything that you've just done and write your code on a pen and paper. If you get ChatGPT to write something for you, hallucinations happen. You also have to fact check what it's giving you. When I presented this paper actually at a conference last year, and you can stop me if you want, it's not the approach I would take.
You have some theories.
And my prediction is that
How does ethics come together?
wipe social media out and design it. You would not design it the way it was designed. We'll just use all the data from the internet. Who cares if we have permission or not? Let's just soak it all up and use it.
Oh, this is cool. I'm in front of the wheel, right? That's human experience.
The Beatles might never die. Michael Jackson might never die. Tupac Shakur turned up some months ago doing a live performance.
As an AI girlfriend.
Well, how truthful people are about using it and what they're using it for. Someone like me who is not creative, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't write music, whatever it is. I think saying you're not allowed to use it is setting you up for potential...
I'm now opening a debate in terms of you writing your own album. I wrote my album, you automated your album, and you made more money than...
I know it sounds funny saying break it, but it's how you learn. And it's the same with these Gen AIs. We still don't understand the human mind.
Hey, before we jump in, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying the show, please hit that follow or subscribe button. It really helps the channel get noticed, so more people who are into the same stuff can find us. Plus, it will make me happy and inspired to bring in more guests who are great at what they do. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and today we're going to talk about AI, which is kind of interesting for me. The reason why I have interest and invited you is because of your work with AI. It's interesting to me in terms of right now what AI is. Whenever we talk about AI at work, it's only ChatGPT.
Yep.
Right. So now before we head on, please introduce yourself.
Certainly, yeah. My name is Cathal Doyle. I'm a senior lecturer here at Victoria University of Wellington. And I guess a point that I should put across is I'm in the School of Information Management. And a question I get quite often is, what is the School of Information Management? And we're actually made up of two schools. And one is Information Systems, and the other one is Information Studies, which is to do with librarians and that kind of stuff. And the reason I say that is probably a hint to what we'll talk about a little later is, well, what is an information system? And well, I've been doing information systems for about 20 years now, based on study, work, and now lecturing. And my mother still thinks I do computers. So
Are they two separate?
they are very separate things in that, and I guess where it often comes up is computer science. So computer science are generally worried about developing things, programming, and whatnot, whereas information systems is we talk about how people, process, and technology interact with each other. And you'll see there that technology comes into it, but definitely the other thing we're interested in is the people and how they interact with technology, and any process that they have to execute, and where technology might fit into that, and might not fit into that. So that's why I guess I'm in information systems, and what I'm interested in is AI and how people interact with it actually.
Okay. Before we deep dive into AI, is it a fair statement that it's part of it's one of the studies you made with the Cranefield?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Cranefield is a colleague of mine.
Oh.
Cranefield, yes. We've been working together for years now, and that kind of started with, we just got on very well as colleagues, and we for a few years passed and we didn't do anything, even though every time we were like, we should work together, we think we'd have a fun thing to or a fun time doing some research, and yeah, we came up with a project called norm tech, and that's kind of a big umbrella term that we use to kind of say how technology starts to get normalized in work, in our personal lives, and so on and so forth. And the paper that I sent you is a paper that I wrote with Jocelyn that kind of looks at humanistic outcomes in artificial intelligence, or AI, and all that wonderful stuff.
Okay. And what is AI?
A good question. Well, and again, doing quite a bit of reading around it, I suppose. AI to most people, and I think you hinted at this at the start actually, AI for most people only became real in November 2022 when we had what we now term generative AI, which is just basically I can put in a prompt, and depending on the tool I'm using, it might create an image, it might create some text, and so on and so forth. But the reality of it is AI has been around for quite some time and used in lots of different areas. But it's the fact that in that time, around November, with ChatGPT coming out, it made it available to the masses. And that's where people kind of got interested. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize about it, I guess, is behind ChatGPT is a large language model that has just been trained on a load of data to try and understand. And I get a little bit finicky with some words because understand is a strong word, but it basically trains the model on the information that we have in the world. And all that does for you then is tries to guess what the next word should be as it starts to give you answers. So when you put in a prompt, it assumes, I think this is what the next word should be to kind of respond to you.
Is it a prediction model?
It is prediction for now. So
what do you mean for now? Is it gonna do something, invade the whole world?
well, the ultimate goal of AI, I think, is artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and that's the one where AI actually has some awareness. It's aware of what it is, and it's aware of how it can use information to do things. Whereas at the moment, all we have is, I think this is what should be next. So it's not intelligent in the fact that it can't think like humans, it can't feel, it can't understand the world. So a good example of that, and a good experiment that you can do, is ask it about sunsets. Do you like sunsets? It will tell you, I'm an AI, I cannot comprehend what a sunset is, but I do know humans like sunsets, and this is why they like them. And that's a very nice example of what we're actually dealing with, because it's been trained on data that we have. So it understands what a sunset is, it understands what humans think of sunsets, but it doesn't actually know what a sunset is, or it can't tell you what that feeling is actually like. And I guess that's the ultimate goal, and we're quite a bit away. Well,
we don't know.
Depending on who you speak with, some people think we're very, very, very far away, and some people, I think it was someone in Google last year that came out and said we already have it, but it's since been proven that that's not really
True.
Yet.
Right. Yeah. Okay. In your Cranefield study, can I just call it Cranefield study? Is it
Jocelyn's the lead author?
Okay.
So Cranefield study is perfect.
What inspired the team, your team with Justin, to explore the humanistic outcomes? Like, what's there? Why study humanistic outcomes with intelligent personal assistant as a tool?
Yeah, great question. So as I said, we kind of started that bigger project of norm tech, and strangely enough, we started getting these weekly digest emails from a tool. At the time, it was called Microsoft My Analytics, but it's rebranded since to Microsoft Viva. And what was interesting is they started breaking down how productive it thought I was for the week, and it broke it down on a number of different measurements like well-being, collaboration, connections with other people, and productivity was, I think, the fourth thing. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. And then it turns out Jocelyn thought, that's kind of interesting. And we were having a chat one day, and we kind of said, did you notice that digest email? And we're like, yeah. And then we kind of went, there's something in that, isn't there? And as we dug a little deeper, we started to get to this idea of humanistic goals and humanistic outcomes. And I guess there's probably a distinction we should make between instrumental goals and instrumental outcomes versus humanistic outcomes. And the key one, I guess, is with something like instrumental goals, you're generally talking about how you can use a tool to increase productivity or make something faster or make something cheaper or make something whatever it might actually be, versus humanistic goals or humanistic outcomes where we're talking about the human involved in going back to that people process technology side of things. And what's interesting, so it was initially that weekly digest email, that chat that we had, and we kind of went, oh, there's something in this. And then we started to see calls kind of saying, hey, for years in IS research, all we seem to see is instrumental outcomes. That's all we measure. Hey, if you use this tool, it'll make you more productive, or if you use this tool, it'll make things faster. And we forgot about the people aspect in that triangle. We seem to forget that, hey, there is a human involved here, or humans, depending on what you're looking at. And that's where we kind of went, okay, hold on, we're seeing these tools slightly change, and we're seeing a call in the research discipline saying, why aren't we studying this more? So we kind of felt, yeah, there's a nice project to be done there. And I guess to give you a good example of what we're kind of talking about here, just to make it clear, I think most people are kind of familiar with Grammarly. And Grammarly, the way Grammarly always positioned itself was, we will tell you when you spelled something wrong or if you're grammatically incorrect, right? And it says, you spelled this word wrong, this is how you spell it. Or it'll say, this is grammatically incorrect, this is how it should be done. And that's an instrumental outcome, right? But then from a humanistic perspective, they've changed it now, where they kind of start saying, actually, using that word, that group of people don't like it. Here's a better way of saying it. So the human aspect is looking at who the intended audience is in that particular example there. Or another function that we'll probably talk a little bit about as well is it has tones. So it tells you or tries to tell you, and I think tries is probably the key word, but it tries to tell you the tone of your message. So whether it's a happy message or a strict message or a knowledgeable message, whatever it is. And again, what it's trying to do is get you, the person who's writing that, to think about your audience. So again, thinking about the human aspect inside there. And if you look at Grammarly's website, it's no longer a spell checker, it's now an AI assistant is what they call it. I can't remember the exact terms, but AI or writing assistant is what they call it.
So it sounds to me that humanistic outcome is people. I'm just trying to reinstate it. And then the tool, instrumental outcome, is the tool that we use right now. I mean, like, what's the goal of the tool? Make our lives easier.
Yeah.
Did I got it correctly?
Yeah, 100%. Well, what it is and what instrumentalists do it is, it's generally talking about how you make things faster, how you automate things, or how do you how you do things.
Is it making us lazy? I mean, in a way, like, I'm going to give you an example. I'm a Filipino who migrated here, and I want to make sure that my grammar is correct, right? I'm gonna use Grammarly, and then Grammarly will give me kind of suggestions. But in a way, for me, learning how to properly tone the sentence is no longer in my list of something to improve because I already have a tool. Is that the intention?
I don't think the intention is to make us lazy, but whether or not it does, I'm not too sure. As an example, I think what would be better is if it tells you why you would do it this way as opposed to another way. Or so the idea, and again, that's something that we'll probably get to in a few moments, but the idea isn't, hey, you've done that wrong, this is the correct way to do it. The idea would be, you've done that wrong, here's how you can do it, and here's why you should do it this way. So it's kind of trying to give you that feedback loop. So the idea being it's trying to get you to understand why you would phrase something this way versus that way.
I remember when I was in a meeting and then discussing some papers and stuff, and then some of my colleagues said, you have to use the right word, right? And I feel like that's just what you've just said. Like, AI will suggest this is probably the right tone.
Yes.
Right?
Well, to a certain degree, for the moment, it will do that. Yeah, again, maybe even further down, we'll talk a little bit about how it might advance in the future.
Okay, you have some theories or some gossips?
Some ideas.
Some ideas. Okay.
Is what I would say.
Okay. You didn't mention in terms of like your interest in AI, why Grammarly versus Viva Analytics? Why not other tools available? Are you paid by Grammarly?
Oh, yeah. Maybe there is an opportunity there.
Who knows, right?
It's funny because we did have some of those chats actually initially. Almost that fear of everything is listening to us, and some of the fear was around if we use Microsoft Teams to talk about Microsoft Viva, does that impact us in some way? But I think we were getting a little bit too into the weeds with that one, in that I don't think that would have happened. But no, I'm not paid by.
Okay. Just to make sure that we're objective, not influenced by an organization being paid by.
The real reason is actually probably simpler with most things, really. It's that Viva just happened to be a tool that we have in the university here, and it just happened to send us those weekly digest emails I was on about, and that we kind of went, interesting. That piqued our interest. It's a tool we use. What's this button when I click on it? That it's telling me to go have a look at, and that was actually the start of it. That we just found that interesting. And Grammarly, I can't remember how Grammarly came about, but it was, if I was to guess, it was probably something to do with Jocelyn saying, I've noticed this thing in Grammarly. I didn't use Grammarly at the time actually. And yeah, we both kind of signed up to Grammarly Premium just to see the full suite of the full suite of things.
I signed up for that, and just for the sake of the plagiarism back then, just because you don't want to like put something there that someone has already like accidentally. You don't want to put there, even if you say I accidentally put it there. No one would probably believe you.
Exactly, yeah. You'd be amazed by how many people accidentally put it there.
Yeah, accidentally, but copied from someone else's work. So.
Yeah. And that's how it's as simple as that, really. Those two tools, and we as we were doing this particular study, we started to realize, these tools fit nicely. And I'm sure outside of those, there are other tools that we could potentially look at. Because again, and I guess something to kind of talk a little bit about is when we say information systems, you can study them from many perspectives. I mean, the biggest one is from a societal perspective. You can look at it as an information system, and then you can look at organizations. Within organizations, you can look at an individual level, a group level, or a whole organization level. And then outside that again, you can look at information systems from a personal level. And I always say that one to my students. I mean, the one I say to students always is, have you thought about your snapper card, for example? Because it's something that I guess most people in Wellington will have used at some stage to get the bus around. And I break it down into, hey, the process I want to talk about is Cathal getting to work. And I break it down into activities: set my alarm the night before, wake up, eat my breakfast, pack my bag, go into work, wait for the bus, go into work. And then the snapper card is the technology, where there's a little chip inside that card. I have to swipe it. There's a piece of technology there that has some software and hardware behind it. And the question I always ask my students is, this is a personal information system. And the way we normally look at these is, how can we make it faster? Or how can we improve the quality? Or how can we reduce the cost and so on? And like the one I always say is an easy example is, Cathal arrives to work 15 minutes late every day. How are we going to change that? Well, cut out breakfast. So now Cathal arrives to work on time, but Cathal doesn't do very good work for the first 2 hours because he needs his food to have the quality. And you're always fighting with those things where if you want to improve the quality of something, cost tends to have to increase, and so on and so forth. And that's what we look at then when we say, well, where does the AI fit into such a thing? But going back to it, they're the different levels with which that you can actually look at information systems. And so yeah, in this particular paper, we're generally talking about organizations and individuals and groups, how they kind of work.
So what's the effect of that with research on the side of the students using AI?
Do you know what? I haven't done that yet, right? As in, and it's a good question actually, because as I said, November 2022, we will probably look back at it some stage and go, that's when things change, you know, as in, and it forces a lot of people to change. But from a university perspective, it was interesting hearing people's views, right? Because some people kind of went, well, this means we now need to go back to pen and paper exams, and that's how we test students. And other people viewed it as, okay, that means we need to change because the world is changing. You can see it already, you know? And it was a colleague of mine whose insight that I just parrot. It's not my original idea, but he put my thoughts into words really. Where his thing was, students are going to be using this in organizations in a few years' time. It's our job to train them or teach them how to do that. And I guess a word that comes up quite a bit as well is how to do that ethically. So to make sure you are using it correctly in the right way for the right reasons. And I would be a fan of that approach, which is, how do we teach students to use this? I use it, a number of my colleagues use it. So why would we then turn around to students and say, you can't use it? I don't have any projects on it done, but we are working on a few research projects. And again, I've heard a few ideas, like there's a brilliant one around how we can create an exam, or it's not an exam, an assignment around using something like ChatGPT to actually do the assignment. So the idea being, you have to write a prompt that gets a response, proofread the response, then you provide the citations to show that the things that it is saying is true. So what you're more interested in is how you use the tool to get an outcome and to make sure your outcome is good or as right as can be, as opposed to going back to pen and paper in a room and saying,
go back to manual.
Go back, exactly. But you know what it reminded me of is when I was in university, I'll never forget it, we were learning programming, right? And anyone who's learned programming will know it's about sitting in front of a computer, pressing buttons, failing, and then making that little change, like adding a semicolon, and bang, all of a sudden you get that little victory until the next problem occurs in your code, right? And they're the little victories that make it, I think, worthwhile. But I'll never forget when we got to the exam time, it was pen and paper, and we'd spent 9 months programming on a computer, and then someone said, now forget everything that you've just done and write your code on a pen and paper. And they give you a picture of a website and say, write the code for this website. And I just remember sitting there going, this is crazy. I spent 9 months where it gives me feedback to say, something's wrong, have a look at this, something's wrong, have a look at it, and I can change it. But now you're asking me to just write it out. And I remember at the time thinking, this is weird. This is not, I don't like this. That same with I guess students and stuff here is I don't see it as, hey, use a computer all the way up and now we're going to test you in an isolated room and see. And I'm sure for some assignments or some subjects it works. But I prefer the idea of actually thinking about how do we change or how do we adapt to an environment that is clearly adapting outside us, as opposed to going back to what we know, I guess.
So what's the goal then? I mean, I know we're still writing some stuff around making sure that it's ethically implemented or ethically being used. So in your point of view, what's the plan? Any insights around making sure that it's going to be ethically used by students?
There's a few things that I would say, and I'm by no means an expert in the ethics side of things. There's literally a whole stream of research that does it, and I dabble a little bit of, obviously, because it is, when we talk about AI and stuff, it is something that is going to come up again and again. I mean, my most extreme view is that something like ChatGPT we shouldn't be using from an ethical standpoint, simply because we know that what it's been trained on is a lot of data that it didn't have the rights to use. So be it books or paintings or whatever it actually is that they used. So from that level, so again, ethics, I guess, happens at different levels, but from that big wide perspective of ethics, we probably should not be using, we shouldn't be using ChatGPT. But what tends to happen is we fall into, hey, it's there now. The thing has been done.
How can we control it?
It's more, this helps me do something better or quicker or faster, or whatever it is, I'm going to use it. And we tend to justify it to ourselves in some way. But coming down from that level, and that's a very extreme, but there are discussions happening around in that area. But coming down to the ethics of using it for students, and I would say in work as well, I think we have to train people how to use it. So to give you an example of that, I don't want my students to go away and put into ChatGPT, here's my question, here, give me the answer, and it gives an answer and they submit it. That's not how it will work when you're out working either, as in, okay, some people might do it and get away with it, but the reality is it won't help you like that. So what I think is we need to kind of, as I was saying a moment ago, teach them, okay, if you use it, you have to declare that you use it. But critically, if you use it, you also have to fact check what it's giving you, because again, hallucinations happen, and hallucinations are that one where, and again, another, I guess, weakness of something like ChatGPT is it has to give you an answer, right?
What's hallucination? This is with AI. Hallucination.
This is with AI.
Yeah.
So hallucinations are where it makes stuff up. It's not doing it on purpose, but it's going back to what we said at the start. It's guessing what it needs to tell you. And it's guessing based on all the data it already has inside there. So quite often, I mean, we've seen there's been some good cases with this. I mean, there was that lawyer in America who went to court and basically had ChatGPT write his bloody argument for him and cite all these cases that didn't exist. That's an hallucination, and it does that quite often. So the idea that students would go away and get it to write an essay for them and give you your answer back without going through that information to make sure it's true would be wrong, and again, if you were in an organization, it's the same idea. If you were using ChatGPT to create some documents for you, you would want to make sure that what it is true, as in, is this sentence correct, or is this piece of information correct, or whatever it might actually be. And again, there's some great examples out there. There was I can't remember the name of the book I'm reading at the moment, but it's on AI, and it talks about how AI is a mirror and some fascinating stuff in there. But the author was giving an example of how she was being introduced to at some event, and they'd obviously used ChatGPT to write the intro for her. So don't do that when you're writing the intro. But
I'll probably just copy paste your. Oh, let's write that.
Yeah. But it does that, yeah. And what it done was it assumed that she'd gone to an Ivy League university because she was now a lecturer at an Ivy League university, right? But the data it's trained on presumes if you get to here, you are likely to have gone through these steps as opposed to your own actual path, right? And what it does is, again, as I say, it has to give you an answer. So it just says, oh, I'm going to assume she probably went to this university because of where she is now. And she kind of states, it wasn't true at all. I went to a local college and I went through a completely different route. But the hallucination was, I'm going to assume we don't have that information, that exact information, but based on what we do have of you now, this is what we're going to assume for you.
Especially if you limit the AI in terms of like 1,000 words. So it will try to come up with 1,000 words.
Well, but that's the thing, like, yeah, it will try and do what you ask it to
Right.
ask it to do, and that's what I mean by with our students. Then that's what I want. That's what I think we need to be explaining to them is, hey, it can be very powerful, it can be very interesting, but you do need to check what it's telling you is true, and that it it hasn't put in some things that you shouldn't have inside there.
How about those AI, not ChatGPT, those AI who can... I'm not quite sure though if it's in Auckland University who are they're the ones creating an app to confirm if the paper is done by AI.
I'm still skeptical of that, and the reason is, and if you get ChatGPT to write something for you, there probably, because someone did say to me, there are tools that can go through and tell you whether or not it was AI generated, and maybe there is, and I just haven't seen about it. In my head, the reason I say skeptical is, okay, there's probably some telltale signs. I know, for example, a very simple one, ChatGPT uses the letter Z, so it uses American English.
That alone, right?
What?
That alone will tell you.
And that to me, I guess some people use Z, I use S all the time, but generally I would go, oh, okay, there's a lot of Zs inside your organization, for example, spelled with Zs, but that's not enough for me to be able to say that's ChatGPT. So I'm sure there are tools, or people are trying to develop the tools, but I still think it's not the approach I would take. As I say, I would go back to the teaching of how to use it versus the trying to catch them using it. And again, if we go back to some of the other things, because again, the ethics come in around. Not a lot of people seem to realize if you put data into these, that gets sucked up into training the GPT further, right? And again, trying to explain or teach to students that what you put in there will get used and can come back to haunt you in some other way. And what I mean by that is, again, if you're in an organization and you've been asked to write a report on some Excel file or something, right? You can easily grab the Excel file, drop it into ChatGPT, say, hey, write this for me. It'll do it. But that file is now in the system, so to speak. And all of a sudden, that can contain personal data. It can contain private organizational data, whatever it might actually be. And you don't want to be doing that.
It captures your prompt.
Not your prompt, but the data you put into it. So like, I don't know, I guess we should kind of mention, and sorry if I keep saying ChatGPT.
That's the most popular.
It's the most popular, and it's the one that everyone, but we tend to refer to these as Gen AI, so generative AI. Yeah, there's many different ones. I think the one I'm using at the moment is Google Gemini, for example. But if you use the basic version, it's only text prompts that you can put in and it'll give you responses. If you use the paid version, you can put files in there. So I can drop Excel files, I can drop PDF files, I can do whatever I want, and it will read them and respond to my prompts depending on what I ask it. But as I say, the minute you drop that Excel file in there, you can be sure that's being pulled away somewhere and used in the training of the ChatGPT.
Right.
And then what will start to happen is, if you're working in an organization and you have a file that is private or contains information that's private, and you drop it in there, the GPT will eventually train itself
Based on
around
that.
it, based on that. Now, that my fear, and again, this is only an assumption, and not a this is what will happen. But as they get better, they'll start linking data together. So if you're in an organization that has, we'll just say, for argument's sake, personal data of people, it will eventually start linking that data to that person elsewhere within its training model. And for example, if my phone number happened to be in there and one of my students typed in, do you have Cathal Doyle's phone number?
And then it will pop.
And then it pops up. And you go, well, how the hell did you manage to get that?
Like stalking you.
Exactly. And that's the type of thing. And if we go back to the question around, I always say prevention is better than treatment, and that idea of, by being able to teach students that stuff now, you're hoping that by the time they get into an organization or they get into the workforce or whatever it is, or if they're just using it at home, they're more aware of what this tool actually is and what it is good for, what it's not so good for, how I should use it, what I shouldn't use it for, and so on and so forth.
Right. I'm looking at it as a challenge at the moment, like understanding the whole AI, given it's not new, but it's new for most people. But for those who haven't heard about it, it's been here for quite some time now. Like if you're watching YouTube, it knows what you're probably gonna watch next based on what you just watched, right? The algorithm, that's the AI, basically, right? If that's correct. Yeah. Even in shopping, when you do online shopping, it probably gonna recommend your next, I don't know, you want some cameras, for example. Now there's a new camera, so it's probably gonna show you another camera that you might be interested in. So that's AI too. So if we are going to the work side of things, how do you think this whole AI, ethically speaking, how can we like benefit from this AI thing when it comes to work, like corporate business? I'm a BA by profession. So how do you think this AI thing will be of use for me?
It's a great question, I would actually say, because I still think we're in the funny world of people trying to figure that out, right? How can I use this? I go back to probably about 12, 18 months ago, and I love asking, when it was kind of exploding and everyone was using it or trying to use it or heard about it at the very least. And you kind of say, oh, what do you use? I used to ask people what they use it for. And I remember one guy going, it writes my emails. I said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, every email I receive, I put it into it and it gives me a response. And then I check that response and I put it into my email and send it, right? Now, crucially for him, he said, I now get time on the things I'm supposed to be doing as opposed to all my time writing emails. Or I've a colleague who told me he uses it to write his notes for his slides, right? So he puts his slides in there and says, can you write the notes for me? And then he uses that and refreshes, changes it a little bit depending on what he actually wants to say. And then you've other people who use it. Hey, I need to write a document. I can feed it some data and kind of see what it says back to me and so on and so forth. So the way a lot of people try and see it is from a productivity side of things. Does it allow me to do my job faster, or does it allow me to do it better, or whatever that might actually be? And I still think that's where we are. I mean, I've written down here the types of things that we use it for. I mean, it's used in loan applications to detect financial fraud, diagnose cancers, evaluate job applications, and so on and so forth. It drives vehicles. I mean, people go as far as that. But when we flip that to the role of a business analyst, I think people are still trying to work that out, because if we think about it, the one I kind of always go back to is if you're doing requirements gathering, for example, how or where does it fit in there, or does it fit in there? I guess would be a follow-up question. And when I talk to, I think I was kind of saying earlier, we're looking at a project called transparency of AI use. And the idea being some organizations have rules around how you can use it. Some people say you can, some people say you can, some people say only for this, and some people only for that, and so on and so forth. But when we spoke to a few VAs to kind of gauge, are they using it, and trying to figure out what they're using it for, the first one was most of them were using it for writing documents. Lots of documentation that they had to get done. Few people for data analysis. So going back to what I said a moment ago, which is you can drop a file in there and get it to analyze the data depending on the prompt that you put in. So people were doing that stuff and whatnot. But what was fascinating with that initial just inquiry, just to kind of see, is some people were allowed to use it, so it was absolutely fine. And some people weren't allowed to use it and realized, I need to use this, or I want to use this, because again, it goes back to, it allows me to do my work faster or maybe better, depending on how good you are, I guess. But in those cases, people were finding workarounds. What's the easiest workaround? I have a mobile phone in my pocket that I can turn on to my own personal data and use ChatGPT. Or I can go home and I have a work computer, or I have my own personal laptop at home. I can use ChatGPT on that. So even if the organization shuts it down here, I still have ways to get around that particular system. And that's why that's an interesting one to me, because it almost mirrors what we're kind of saying with the students, which is by saying, no, you can't use this, people aren't going to just go, okay, and I'll go do this. If people realize that if they think there's a benefit to it, or it's helping them in some way, they're going to find ways to get around that. Yeah, and that's so as a BA, we're still trying to work out, well, what are the things? Because a lot of the BAs at that time kind of said to us, hey, as I said, documentation is what I use it for. Or a lot of them said, we're still trying to work it out, or I'm still trying to work it out. And then we had other people say, I don't see any benefit. I don't think it's going to impact my role. And that goes back to something that we said earlier, that scale of, I'm amazed by the people I've spoken to who, you've these people on this side who say it's going to change the world, and you've people on this side who are saying, I don't think it's going to be as good as we think it is. And as usual, we're probably going to end up somewhere here in the middle. And when I say the middle, it's some people will find ways of using it that help them and go, this is good for my role. So going back to that guy with the emails, I don't know if that's a good way to use it, but for him, the way he saw it was, it allows me to do the actual work I'm supposed to be doing, because it'll write those, I get it to write those emails for me.
Did he get a chance to read his email that has been sent out?
No, he would, yeah.
Okay.
So at that time,
making sure, like,
what he was doing was literally he'd copy the email, paste it into ChatGPT. Can you write a response for me for this email? Here's a response, and then he would proof check it, not just send it. I hope. But that, I guess that gets to kind of something that I hinted at the start, and kind of if and you can stop me if you want, but talking about even just a potential future of what might happen there, right? And this might be I don't think it's too crazy of an idea, right? But we kind of talk about how if you take we've a paper written around this where we talk about relationships, right? So if I think about my students, we have a dyadic relationship, right? I go to class, teach a class, I give them some assignments, then they kind of respond to me by sending me the assignments. Some might email me, and so on and so forth, right? So you have this relationship with each of them. But in recent years, we've kind of went, is that a triadic relationship now, right? Because you have this AI sitting in between you, even if it's something like Grammarly, we'll say, right? So all of a sudden, Grammarly is sitting between that relationship. So we kind of say it becomes a triadic relationship, right? Because I could be using it, they could be using it, and everything we're writing is going through it to kind of make sure, going back to that, the tone is what I want it to be, or that whatever else you want in there, that the right language is being used and all of that stuff. Now, my prediction is that if we think about that network and how a network normally fits, it's people and sometimes there's technology and so on and so forth, is that AI that'll sit between us will know our relationship. So the idea being, based on the data it's fed on all the communications we've had with one another, whether it be through chat, whether it be through email and so on and so forth, it starts to go, oh, hey, Cathal and Jocelyn, I think I know your relationship. So it'll write the emails based on its understanding of our relationship. So the more you use it, the better it gets at trying to. So going back to that guy's example, you won't, could be wrong, but you won't have to proofread it. You'll kind of go, oh, I think it knows us well enough now at this stage, and I trust it knows how to write it. Now that's a dystopian. I think that's a dystopian future in some ways, but interesting in other ways.
I was thinking like maybe I would put some swearing in it, like.
But that's what I mean.
Like, I didn't write it. No, you said it to me, but there's a swearing in it.
and that's the thing, and it kind of goes to something that was in this paper where we kind of talked about the automation of humanistic actions, right? Or humanistic outcomes is what I would normally say. And when I presented this paper actually at a conference last year, that was the question that was asked of me. A guy put his hand up and goes, what if I don't care about the people around me, and I just want to go to work, do my job, but then this tool can make it seem like I'm thinking of others and thinking of myself? And it's a great question. And that's what we have in the paper here, of that idea of automating some of those actions, right? So you don't have to be humanistic, but you can almost pretend like you think of others. And a good example of that, again, one of those tools, Microsoft Viva, I was writing an email one evening and it just popped up and it says, hey, your colleague is out of office now. It's 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. in the evening. Do you want me to send this for you in the morning when they're in their office? And I kind of sat there and I thought, what an interesting question. And that made me think about, and again, it gives you a little explanation, like you shouldn't be sending emails outside of work hours because it sets an expectation, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of went, yeah, turn that on. Do you know, I said, that sounds, and again, the idea behind it is you're thinking of your colleague, you know, going, do I want to be emailing colleagues at 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. in the evening? And that's that idea of automating the humanistic outcome, which is, hey, you can still write your email in the evening if you want, but I'll handle the delivery of it in the morning, or if it's in the weekend, Monday morning for you, so that, yeah, you're not sending emails to colleagues at night. I think that's interesting. But I think the automation of it is fascinating.
They're also using that, I believe, in marketing now. Like they will send out an email automation to you based on how your behavior online. I heard some commercials around it, and then using AI, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully they're not just using the word AI just to market their tool.
Well, that's a good point you raise, right? And that is something that we have to be aware of. I mean, AI is a buzzword now. I honestly cannot sit through a meeting without someone bringing up AI, right? Whatever the meeting is, people will find a way to say AI and so on and so forth. And yeah, I guess we have to be a little bit careful, that marketing side, and organizations are aware, well, we better sound futuristic here, put in the word
Yes,
AI.
AI.
Exactly. And that's why even when we look at these types of tools, and again, when we look at Grammarly or we look at Microsoft Viva, something that I'd love to do is go to the development side of it, right? Which is what AI are you actually using? Like if you read up, and again, you can go to their websites and kind of they'll explain it, and they talk about machine learning and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think something that, and talking about ethics and whatnot, it's a fascinating area to go, well, how do we, the one I always talk about is how do we learn from our past to prepare for the future, right? And the biggest one of that I see is social media, right? If you today, with all the knowledge that we have about social media and how destructive it is in many ways, if you had that knowledge today, but you were asked to wipe social media out and design it, you would not design it the way it was designed. And if we think about the way it was designed, was private organizations built the systems and obviously made them or tried to make them as addictive as possible, so you have that endless scrolling and so on and so forth. You wouldn't design it that way. You would say, hold on a second, we need to take a human side to this, and you would probably start from there. I argue the same with AI today, or especially if we talk about something like Gen AI. Again, it's private organizations that are doing it. We've no idea. Well, we do know what their goal is to make as much money as we possibly can. And in order to do that, a case in point, we'll just use all the data from the internet. Who cares if we have permission or not? Let's just soak it all up and use it. And that's a fear, and probably something we should be thinking about is, how do we design these? Who designs them? What do they have to, what rules or laws should they have to abide by?
Privacy.
Privacy is a huge one. And yeah, whether or not we're actually repeating the past, probably.
Didn't learn our lessons.
Yeah, no. So lessons? Why?
Right. You mentioned about the diagnosis. How does ethics come into the picture of that, like AI being able to diagnose? I heard they're working on AI in the US where it can diagnose, I don't know, certain types of...
Yeah. I think is it breast cancer? I think it's very good at doing, and I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but it has a crazily good success rate and so on and so forth. But that is, see, to me that's slightly different, right? And the reason is the data it's been trained on is just lots of images they have already. Well, you'd hope images or data that we have, we can train. A GBT is what I keep calling it, but what it's called is a large language model, and it basically says, hey, take all these images and what it starts to do is train itself on, okay, this is what we need to look for, not look for, so on and so forth. And then when you start feeding it new images, it's able to go, okay, based on my understanding of everything we have, this is it, I know what I'm looking for. So in a case like that, I think you would hope ethically that it's being done properly.
Right. When you say language model, let's say breast cancer, sounds to me that it's holding a huge amount, or it read a huge amount of number of books about breast cancer to learn about breast cancer, so it can diagnose breast cancer.
Is that the idea? That's the idea. Okay. Except rather than reading books, it'd probably look at images. So you would train it on images of what breast cancer looks like, and what it doesn't look like. And then what it trains itself based on those images. Now, it takes, as you can imagine, a lot of data for it to understand what that is before it's useful. But it is, I can't remember the study, but yeah, it is useful at that type of thing at the moment. But to contrast that, right? The other one I've written down here is driving vehicles.
Yeah, right? Like Tesla trying to do the self-driving mechanism.
Exactly, right? But again, if you think about it, all all it can do is drive based on all the data it's been trained upon to know what the rules of the road are, or and so on and so forth. But the problem it runs into is roads are unpredictable. Things happen that the data probably can train it to do, right? So that's why in places like, it's mad, in is it San Francisco and I think Los Angeles, they have self-driving cars. They are there.
It exists now.
It exists. I mean, these are going, you can, it's like Uber, you can book it. I was only watching a guy the last day in Los Angeles do it. And it was the weirdest thing. Even just watching him was strange because he was sitting in the back. There's no one in the front. It looks like a car, but it is driving, right?
Oh, scary.
It's scary. And that was what he said was, he goes, you just feel, no, maybe that's something we get used to, whatever. But the problem is roads are unpredictable. Different things happen that someone might be drunk and might stumble out on the road or something. Or someone might be drunk driving a car and act different. And then your car may not have the data. Now, I know it has cameras to try and go, I shouldn't hit that thing or I shouldn't hit that thing. But trying to react quickly is not a strong point of it.
Wow. Interesting. What if they can improve that in the future? Like, who knows? 10 years from now, that could probably be an upgraded version.
I mean, it sounds amazing. Again, like if you said to me, you don't have to drive anywhere, as much as I like driving, I'd be like, great. I can just sit in the car. In my lifetime, I will never have the trust to be able to do it. But in an ideal world, yeah, it would learn or understand how to navigate roads.
It seems like we're trying to remove human experience out of it. Like for me, in going back to Philippines, obviously we're not a rich family where you don't have cars. Usually, you go on public transport, and then when you get a chance to drive a car, it's like, oh, this is cool. Even if it's an old model of a car, like, oh, this is cool. I'm in front of the wheel, right? That's human experience. Now, when we have self-driving cars in AI, we're removing that experience. Probably, like, who knows? 10 years from now, some kids would be like, I want to be in front of the wheel.
But what's even funnier is to think in 50 years' time, if that came in, it was all great. 50 years' time, it'll be cool to go, I can drive a car. I never learned, but now I can. I have an old car, and it somehow allows me to drive. But you are right. Go back to the word I used here a moment ago, which is automation. To me, it's an instrumental outcome quite often. So, if we think about information systems that I talked about earlier, the thing that we're often looking for is, how can we automate things in our process so the human can do other things, right? And it keeps coming back. And whether or not I'm sure for some instances it's very good. Some tasks we just want to automate and we just want to not have to deal with it. And they can be boring, routine tasks that you can do. But other things are a little bit more exciting, such as I enjoy driving cars. I enjoy sitting in a car, and I drive manual.
Manual?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
Of course.
We have manuals back in Philippines, but here, like...
everything here is automatic.
Yeah, like, what? Boring.
It's boring. It's a boring way to drive a car, and that's why when I drive the automatic, get no excitement out of it. I'm just like, I just press go and I press stop. I press go. So that I feel like, you can automate that and let me sit in the back and do my work or play my bloody Nintendo Switch or whatever it actually is. But again, and they're I guess the trade-offs that we're constantly asking ourselves is, can the AI do this for me? And if it does, can it do it well enough so that I can do something else? So going back to that guy a minute ago, hey, you can do my emails for me. I can actually go do the tasks that I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
And interestingly, to your question, I guess a few minutes ago about your role and how it might impact your role. Again, I know I keep talking about projects that we're working on, but it's another project which looks at how humans are going to have to adapt to human-facing roles and AI-facing roles.
Oh, two different things now.
Two different things.
What's AI facing role now?
Well, the thing is, anywhere that you interact with one of these intelligent personal assistants is you working with an AI. So you kind of go, well, how do I work with an AI? And how do I go back to working with a human? And we call them micro tasks because a task is quite a big thing, but within that task you break it down. So 1 minute you might be talking to someone here, the next minute for the same task you're sitting down and you're chatting with you're either using something like Grammarly or you're looking at Microsoft Viva, and then you're going back to the human again, and that's a skill that you will need to develop, as in how do you jump between those kind of experiences or those kind of micro tasks.
You've just given me an idea. So working as a BA, doing requirements gathering, regardless if the person I'm working with is in the room or not, I'm probably just gonna copy paste all their processes into an AI, and here is your requirements. No one-on-one session required. That's gonna happen, right?
You technically can do that now. Right. If you have a paid version of any of those tools like ChatGPT, you can take a process diagram, drop it into it, and say, hey, can you write some requirements for me here? But again, what you need to be aware of now is it's not going to give you the perfect ones, and it's not going to give you, it may have some hallucinations in there.
But there's a trade-off then. My human interaction skill that I wanted to that I wanted to improve, like social skills, it's gone.
Yeah.
And then my communication skills, which is part of social skills anyway, it's gone now because now it's the robot who's doing it. Wow.
I don't have an answer for you.
No, that's all right.
In terms of
too early, probably.
Exactly. As I said earlier, it's like it's the same thing with any piece of technology that comes into play. I mean, one of the most basic examples, and I know it's a bit of a silly one, but I remember there was once upon a time I knew everyone's phone number that I needed to know.
Memorized.
Yeah. I knew my father's, my mother's, my brother's, my friends, and so on and so forth. This is a fact. I barely know my Kiwi number after 8 years.
Wow.
For some reason, I had to force myself to learn it. But up until about 2 years ago, anytime I went into a shop or wherever and they said, can we have your phone number? I'd have to take my phone out, go into contacts, go into New Zealand, and I didn't know my number. But the idea being, it's in a database in my phone. I don't need to remember it anymore. And the same with things like Google. I mean, the fear that comes along is that, hey, you can now search everything. Everything's on the internet. You don't have to remember anything at all. Isn't this great? But I guess some people have shown that what people tend to do is remember where they found it as opposed to the actual information.
There's a good example there where me and my wife were talking the other day in terms of like growing up during the 90s, wherein if you go somewhere, for some reason, parents have this skill of being able to find you without even telling them where you went. Like, how did you get here?
Yes.
we don't have GPS, we don't have like Google, we don't, like, everything is like manual. Like I remember riding a jeepney looking for my sister before, and then we were able to find like what skill we had back then. And even like, oh, come visit me in our province. We go to a province, we're able to find the place, even if it's our first time to go there. My dad was like, what just happened?
I still look back with my parents. I mean, in 70s and 80s Ireland, they were able to get from our house to our cousin's house, which was 6 hours away, and know the roads, and they knew the routes, and they knew everything. I cannot imagine how I would get around today if Google Maps didn't exist.
Even just roaming around
Wellington, I find myself typing in the name of the place I want to go to, unless it's around here somewhere. I'd know that, but yeah, most of the time I'd be Google Maps tells me this is where you need to go. This is I can't imagine a world where I couldn't do that, but it existed. I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s are the same.
It's still kind of like old school.
And maybe that's an argument for a different day. Is the world a better place for it? I think yes, but yeah,
There will always be trade-off, right?
and that's the biggest thing. There are trade-offs, and yeah, I think with the AI stuff, we're still in that area of working out what those trade-offs are.
Do you think this will just get better? Or I know you mentioned about we are going to stay somewhere in the middle, but while we're on this journey of going into that middle, what extremes are we going to experience? Like, is it gonna be better, or are we gonna experience some turbulence along the way?
It's a good question. How would you answer that one?
We don't know.
We
Or we
don't
do.
know, but
Do we?
it's funny. And again, what I go back to just talking to people, right? Because that's how you tend to, that's how I tend to find out what's kind of happening and not happening. And some of the smartest people I know are convinced that Gen AI, your ChatGPTs, they're not very useful and not very good, right? And the problem I have with that argument is it seems to be coming from a place from people who haven't used it or haven't applied it in a few different ways, right? And then some people who I talk who have done that, obviously some people think it's already amazing and it can act as you see in that term there, the intelligent personal assistant. You can get it to do things for you, or get some of these things to do things for you that are useful, and you start going, oh, that's good, that's nice, that's so on and so forth. But we still have to remember we're only a few years into this thing. The ultimate goal is artificial general intelligence, as I said earlier, right?
What is that?
That's that one where it's able to almost feel, it's able to think, it's actually able to understand, right? And that goes, and that's the difference between the two. Like the current one is, as I said, guessing, whereas artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is when it's people kind of compare it to when it has a human mind almost, right? Where it's actually able to, so going back to what I said earlier about the sunsets, it's not just able to say, oh, I hear humans like sunsets. It's, I like a sunset or I don't like a sunset, and here's why, here's my understanding of it. And we're very, we are very far away from that, right? That's not a thing. But what will, or not a thing for now, but what is there with these is, or with these ones that we have at the moment, your ChatGPTs and Google Geminis, I think are useful as is, but probably going to keep getting better. I still think the ultimate one, and this might scare you a little bit, is I think being able to create your own GPT is what I want to do. And what I mean by that is, it was the first question I asked when we had a chat here again with another colleague of mine. And the first thing I said was, can we create our own? And he, oddly enough, had the same question. He was like, yeah, can we create our own? And you can, but it's not at the user level yet, I would say, in terms of if you're a computer scientist or if you get friendly with computer scientists, they will show you how to create a large language model and what you can do with it and can't do with it and so on and so forth. But if you think about what ChatGPT did, was it made generative AI available to the masses, right? It meant you could go on and say, can you write a song like David Gray? And it will give you the structure of a song with words, you know? And you're going, oh man. And then people went, I do work. Can I get this to do some of that work for me? Yes, I can. Or it can do some tasks and it can't do other tasks. So some people find that quite useful now. And you would say 2 more years, 3 more years, or 5 more years down the road, what does that look like? And to me, it's, hey, I want to be able to train my own GPT, right? Which is, ChatGPT says, hey, here's what you need to do. You need to train it with data, obviously, and you need to set some parameters, whatever it actually is. And an example of that, and going back to the question I asked my colleague that day, was if I put all of our school's information into a GPT and trained it on that, then you could technically create a bot that can answer questions for you based on all the information you fed it. So the example being, if I ask GPT now, can you tell me about Cathal Doyle? It will just give me maybe some information about me. I don't know. And it might hallucinate a little bit and give you some exaggerated information, right? But if I trained my own GPT on the data inside here, so that would include my staff profile from the website, it would know who I am, and it's able to tell you maybe more interesting things.
You mentioned about writing a song. So if I am able to, hypothetically speaking, have an AGI of my own. AGI, is that a thing? I don't know. If
AGI is the future.
The future.
Yeah, but you mean a GPT.
A GPT of my own. So if it knows how I think, kind of, now I will ask that GPT to, can you write a song about, I don't know, it's a death metal song about the donkey, and then it has the song there. Kind of, if it's starting to think like I do, it can write a song. But my point is, where is now going back to that human experience? Like, I only write a song because I've experienced this world, and I don't know, maybe today I'm sad. That's why I wrote a song, so I can express my sadness. But now that's gone. So how can I express my sadness now? My GPT has written my song for me.
Well,
is that ethical?
It is ethical, right? Like, to me, so again, if that's your own GPT, right, that is
Makes
ethical,
sense.
right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
And there's maybe a few points from that there, because it's good. It's a good point, right? The first one is my biggest fear, right? And again, more of a guessing what the future might hold, but the Beatles might never die, right? Michael Jackson might never die. And the reason is they might still start, or this might surprise you, they might start releasing new music, right? Okay, I know the Beatles released a new song a few months ago, but I mean more new music, right? And the way they'll do that is, and again, warning, scary future in many respects, but the way it will do that is your music company who owns the Beatles will train a GPT on all their songs, right? So it'll train it on its lyrics, on the way it plays on its chords, and so on and so forth. And then you say, hey, write me a Beatles album that contains 10 songs.
10 songs.
And what the GPT does is, hey, I've been trained on all of this stuff here. So and remember, that is just on the Beatles, right? That's not on when it's a personal, in this instance, a personal GPT, meaning you train it on your own data, not all on the world's data. It's just been trained on Beatles data. Write me an album. Record company releases that album because, hey, these are Beatles songs. They sound like Beatles songs. We'll probably go, is that the way they would have played that chord? Or some people would do that, as in diehard fans, but most people probably go, oh yeah, sounds like the Beatles. Cool.
Right. If you go technical, like, that doesn't sound like
exactly. If you actually know, and I don't know, but I'm sure there's people out there who could tell you the technical way that John Lennon and Paul McCartney write songs, and they would never play that chord to that chord, or some crazy stuff like that. But record company is going, hey, I have a new Beatles album. We're releasing it. We own the rights. Do we own the image rights? Maybe. Here we go. New
or
Beatles
maybe
album.
maybe get AI to generate the images as well.
Well, it already does that. I mean, ABBA are touring, but they're not hallucinations. They're holograms. Have you seen
Seriously?
that? Yeah.
No.
I mean,
I'll write it ABBA.
ABBA have holograms. And now ABBA are still alive. That's the crazy thing. Michael Jackson has a hologram. Tupac Shakur turned up some months ago as a hologram doing a live performance in that. Like it gets scarier, right? Because as we've seen in the last few months, and scarier might be wrong. I keep saying the word scary. Maybe some people think this is cool. I don't know. But if you think about what we've seen a few months ago, which is ChatGPT now has a voice, has a few different voices depending on what you want to hear. So you go back to your Beatles GPT and you put in the Beatles voices. So now
They can generate that.
it generates them singing as well. So it's writing songs that sound like the Beatles. It's actually singing and playing instruments like the Beatles.
Wow.
That's scary. It is scary, but it's also, is that where we're going? I haven't a clue. But when I listen to people talk about it, they're the types of thoughts that are coming to my head going, hold on a second. We can already get it to write a song like it. Can we get it to write chords or a melody to that? Maybe that's something that we can do. We can put their voices in there so we can get it to sing like it. And then all of a sudden you have an album.
And making money out of it.
And making money, of course. Why do you think they're spending $200 and $300 and $400 million buying Bruce Springsteen's collection and the Beatles collection and everything else in the last few years? Is this interesting? I'll stop using the word scary because people
Interesting, maybe.
but an interesting and it'd be fascinating to see if that happens, right? But the counter argument to that, and maybe I can give you that book title after this, because I think it'd be fairer, because this isn't my thoughts, but I agree with them. But in that book, she compares, and to be fair, I think most of the time she's talking about Gen AI in it, and she kind of says it's a mirror, right? Meaning it can only reflect what it can see in front of us, right? It's just like a mirror. Gen AI or ChatGPT it's only as good as the data that we actually put into it. Turns out we're not putting a lot of good data into it, but that's an argument, a separate argument. But the point that she makes in there is, if we start to rely on GPT or ChatGPT and those types of tools to start creating stuff for us, we lose what being human actually is, which is that creative aspect, that idea that based on things that I've experienced, as you said earlier, I want to write a song based on something that I've done, or based on other things that you've seen and heard and so on. We tend to use that to inform our own experiences. So we might want to write a song, we might want to write a poem, we might want to write a book, and so on and so forth, right? But going back to the example I just gave there about the Beatles GPT, in that essence, as humans, we're not progressing, right? As in, we're stuck in, geez, the Beatles have been around now for 100 years. We get it. And still writing songs. We get it. You know, they were good musicians. They had brilliant songs. But man, we're now on the 50th Beatles AI studio album. Is it ever going to stop? And what ends up happening there is you get trapped in that loop of looking at the past to create a future that resembles or echoes, I guess, the past is what it does, instead of, hey, music can be different, as in you can add other instruments, or you can sing this way, or you can write this way, whatever it actually is. And it's in that book, that argument is something that has resonated quite a lot with me, I guess, because it was something I hadn't thought too much about, which is, we're only feeding it on the experiences we've had to date. So the things it's giving us back is based on
what we feel.
What we've already done.
So what can you say about AI girlfriends or boyfriends? I heard something about that, like someone has an AI girlfriend.
Well, it's
I don't know if it's something that we can talk about, but
No, well, again, I don't have any experience, but
That's another thing, right?
if we were to think about it, I don't know if you've seen that movie, Her. That's one with, is it Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the idea: is you've got a little thing in your ear, and you're forming this relationship. Again, there's probably benefits and drawbacks to it, right? And it goes back to maybe some of the things that you said earlier, which is, if I'm using AI, my social relationships, which I see with other humans, deteriorates or doesn't build or whatever it might actually be, because everything is
AI.
is going through an AI. But a reverse of that is, if it helps people to talk and to get out of whatever rut that they might be in, or if it's something that makes people feel happy or whatever it is, who am I to say, hey, no, that's not the way it should be done.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, there's been examples. There's been there's a tool there. I can't remember what it is. It's I don't think it's boyfriend or girlfriend, but it's a companion. Is kind of how they do it. But it's again, it's, you have to remember what it's doing. It's only guessing what it thinks it should be saying next, as opposed to knowing or having any sense of being. And what's funny is we've as I said, we've spoken to a lot of people who use these tools and whatnot. And one thing that has come through a lot is people talk to it like it's a human. When they're using ChatGPT, they don't just say, tell me this or go do that. They say, hey, how are you? And when it gives them an answer, they say, thanks very much. Any chance you can add. So some people talk to it like, yeah, it's human. I mean, in reality, it's a server sitting somewhere and it's just a computer. But whatever way the people feel as they're interacting with it, yeah, they're actually asking or almost treating it like it's human.
There's a post that I've seen months ago that says like, I am thanking my AI just to make sure that once it gets an awareness, it's not gonna hurt me or something. It remembers that this guy is so polite.
They're nice people.
Nice people, so I'm not gonna hurt. So are we heading into that being AI being sentient or kind of like Skynet thing?
Yeah, not for a long time. And that goes back to the artificial general intelligence. And I mean, we still don't understand the human mind. Like we there's so much we don't know about it. So the idea that we could create something that has something similar, no doubt you're going to text me in a few months' time and go, well,
I told you.
Yeah, there'll be some article that goes, Skynet is true. Skynet is upon us. But what do everyone say? Oh yeah, we'll just pull the plugs. Is what they tend to say. But no, everything that I've read and kind of understood around it, we're not at that level. We're nowhere near that level.
Okay, but do you think in the right person it's good, or in the wrong person it's bad?
Well, I go back to what I was saying earlier about, if we were to design social media today, I would not let private organizations do that. I would say, hold on a second. Knowing what we know now, we need to design these things again. And I guess that comes through in some of our research here around the humanistic aspect, and we keep going back to the human aspect. Where do we fit into all of that? And no, I would be saying it's something at the very least that should be done publicly, and maybe, or not maybe, definitely need some input from government and whatnot into how these things should be used, when they should be used, how they should be designed and developed, and what you can and can't do. But at the moment, we're doing the same thing we did with social media, which is leave it in the hands of private organizations, see what happens, and in 10 years' time, we'll be going, maybe we should have developed some policy or developed regulations around how we develop these tools.
Right. And has this been seen by anyone in terms of the study they've done, in terms of the government being aware about the AI that it's happening, and even though we're too early, but it's already there.
I guess there is a sense of it's too late, it's already happened, but maybe not. I mean, you can always try and get control of it, but no, I don't think we've shown. I don't know if that's the right paper, I guess, to show them in that talk that talks a little bit about how we can use these tools to not just for instrumental outcomes, which is write my essay for me, but also the humanistic side of it, which is things like, have you thought about yourself? Have you thought about your colleagues or whoever the document is intended for? But and again, maybe I've just not seen it, but I'm not aware. My understanding is something like ChatGPT was just created by an organization, and one day they just went, "Hey, this is now available." Their name escape OpenAI.
OpenAI.
And again, that word "open" is in there to try and convince you that somehow this is maybe an open source or developed.
I think it was developed with Elon Musk before. I heard. It sounded to me as well wherein, who knows, the government agencies might start writing legislations out of AI.
Yes, and the reason I would say yes is if you say to someone, "Here's a tool that can help you do things quicker," most people will go, "Yes, okay, I will use that." And that's and the worry around that, obviously, again, is, I said earlier, any tool like this is only as good as the data it's trained on.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And generally, the data we use to train these things is not good data, as in it has a lot of biases in there towards certain groups and certain people and whatever else. So then, when you start using them to write policy, yeah, it can have an impact in what comes true in that policy. But that and I go back to what I said earlier, though. The way around that is to actually train people, or not train is the wrong word, but teach people how and what they do with it, the impacts it actually has. So again, going back to that assignment for students where you say, I want you to use ChatGPT to write an essay, but I don't just want you to give me the prompt you used and say, there's my essay, there's my prompt. I want you to go through and fact check what it's given you and provide your sources and explanations as to why it makes sense. And again, if we go to something like creating a policy, again, something I haven't done, but I'm sure it goes along those lines. Just getting someone to say, write this policy around sustainability, and boom, and I have 10 pages, write, as you said earlier, write 1,000 words, and I have my 1,000 words and I can use it. That's not as useful, or that's a bad way to do it. But if you know, I can use it to start developing it, and then I can have my team can have our input on it, that's a better way, or a smarter way, I guess, to use it.
Yeah. Probably just a framework, like, give me a framework of, I want to write a policy about that, and this is the framework. What's the standard framework?
If there's some kind of a framework that can be created or might already exist. But again, I remember a colleague of mine here did a study a few years ago with a student, and it was around how Google results are based on what Google understands about you, right? So if you believe in this thing, Google will know it if you're signed into Google with your account at work, and it will give you answers that are based on that thing, right? The same way that if I believed in this thing, I would get different answers for the same question based on what Google knows about me. Right? So they looked at some government organization, and looked at are people signed into Google, and if they are, what are the results when you're trying to learn something for policy or learn something for whatever task you're assigned. And that has a huge impact on how you write that document.
Wow.
Because it gives you your results based on. So if you're using a computer not associated with you and anything of who you are, obviously it'll give you
Some random answers.
different answers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably clear your cache. every time you do a search, clear cache.
And that's the thing, and I'm sure GPTs will do something similar, where it'll give you answers that you want.
Any projects you're working on in the future right now? If let's say you're not working here, do you have a dream project? You're not working about AI, for example.
A dream project. Geez, I'm not dreamed in a long time. I'm not dreamt in a long time, I should say.
So how do you decide when it comes to, like, for example, the crane field, or you mentioned you're working on projects right now, on a project right now. How do you decide which project you're working on? Is it like your call, you're going to work with AI? Like,
again, and something that I should say, we we were looking at AI before ChatGPT came out, because I have seen a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon, as tends to happen. If it's a popular topic, and people tend to go, oh yeah, it should maybe look at that a little bit. Genuinely, this project, and I've told this story 1,000 times, but it was out of curiosity. Basically, the two of us we felt we could work well together, and this was it was around the intelligent personal assistants, not the humanistic side, the IPAs, where we were kind of going, hey, these things look like they're starting to come out a little bit, and they're starting to do a few things, and it was just interesting, you know. It was an interesting area, and we went, yeah, let's look at that, because my initial background is in technology and learning. So how can we use technology in different learning environments to encourage or enable better learning or different types of learning? And I've done some amazing stuff inside there that I absolutely love. Like the last few years working on a project that kind of talked about, what was it? We went into primary schools and secondary schools and looking at things like citizen science. And citizen science being this thing that, hey, we can use citizens to help us with different parts of a scientific project. So a great example is NASA take lots of pictures of the sky. And AI at the moment isn't very good at spotting. It's very good at spotting the thing you tell it to spot, but maybe not so good at spotting other things, right? Whereas humans tend to be quite good at going, I know you want me to find that, but what's this green thing all the way over here? And then they go, we don't know what that green thing is. Let us have a look at it. And then it turns out it's a new galaxy that they didn't know existed, and it's now called something like the P galaxy or whatever it is, right? But that it's where you can get citizens to get involved. So in that instance, they're doing data analysis for you, because you've already collected the data with the images, and you use them to look at the data for you, and then you might write a paper off it, right? And we kind of said, hey, what if we use this in the classroom when they're teaching science? Does it help them, first of all, understand the scientific process of going through a research question, collecting, or identifying what data you need, collecting that data, analyzing it, and making observations based on it. And then the other thing is, can it help them teach the topics that they're focused on? And we, again, great project to be a part of. But yeah, the AI one I find funny in that I had that qualifier, as I keep saying, going, we were looking at it before. I think we have a paper from 2021 that kind of talks about what we were doing before. But again, I guess another colleague came to me a few weeks ago, and he wants to do something around databases. And again, I think he came to me more for the approach that he wants to use. I haven't studied databases in 20 years, but it involves AI, that he wants to see if we can use AI to look at databases in some way. Again, I find that when he described the project to me, I went, oh, that sounds amazing. Sign me up. So yeah, I tend to go on if it's something interesting.
How far are we in terms of like achieving the humanistic? How far are we now, or do you think are we delayed?
As I said at the very beginning, information systems, people, process, technology, right? And what we found with what research has found to date is we focused a lot on process and technology, and we seem to forget the people aspect inside there, and that's where the humanistic side comes out of it. And as I said, when we were looking at these two particular tools here, we went, oh, hold on a second, there are some things coming out here, like one of the propositions that they use inside here is development. And this is this idea that humans are constantly trying to develop, learn new things, new ways of doing things, and so on and so forth. So then we kind of go, well, does that exist in any of these systems? And if we look at Microsoft Viva, it now has a whole section dedicated to personal development, right? So it says personal development, hey, here's some classes that we have that you can take because you do this or you do that, or here's a way to develop mindfulness if that's what you're into, and so on and so forth, right? So the idea is the development when we're talking about humanism and humanistic outcomes. But you asked, I think you'd asked me an interesting question a few days ago, and I don't have an answer to it, or a perfect answer, but it builds on your question here, which was, how can we measure, or can we measure the humanistic side of things, right? And I don't know if we can. I don't think there's
the way to measure.
Yeah, I don't think there is a way to measure, as in, if we take well-being, I'm not aware of anything that can measure well-being. I can ask you, and you can say, good, bad, excellent, but there's no way for me to say he is 95% well-being, if you know what I mean. There's no thing. So to your question of how far away are we? Very far away, in terms of when I look at organizations and the way they use systems, everything is instrumental, right? Does this tool or does this software allow you to be quicker, or allow us to be quicker, or whatever? And what's interesting is that fits into what we call here classical management theory, right? And that's the idea that, hey, what's an organization for? It's there to and this might sound a bit harsh, be as productive and add shareholder value whenever possible, right?
Shareholder
value, yeah. It's a funny term, but it's and in that system, right, or in that type of perspective, it's economics, and people are seen as resources to make sure we make as much money as we can, right? You can level it down to something as basic as that. An organization is there to make money, and people and technology are resources to allow that to happen, right? But the humanistic side is built on this idea of humanistic management. And that's the theory, again, kind of trying to build a slightly different one to what you'd call classical management theory, but adding to management theory in the fact that you try and say, well, actually, let's count people as humans. And if we take the longer view, so it isn't, hey, let's make as much money as we can, burn everyone out, and then get rid of them and get the new people in, burn them out, that's not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. Whereas if you try and take the humanistic view, which is, or the humanistic management view is, hey, let's treat people with dignity, or let's recognize development is an important thing. Let's recognize common good is an important thing. And a few other things that we've done there is the wholeness and so on and so forth. The idea being, actually, if we treat our employees as humans, and we kind of encourage these humanistic outcomes, in the longer term, that has a better impact versus instrumental,
Right.
and the way that happens. And I what you'll find is a lot of organizations actually have a mixture of both of them. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every organization is just profit and that's it. A lot of them will have some of the human side things built into it, and I guess that's what this paper is kind of saying is, can technology help with encouraging some of that stuff, like a great one. And I just love this example because I guess few of us fall victim to it all quite often. But one of the things that Microsoft Viva does is, so again, Microsoft Viva just looks at your interaction with
that tool,
with Microsoft's suite of tools.
Yeah.
So anytime you use Outlook, off Teams, it's collecting that data on you, right? And then it tries to frame it in a way to make you think differently and think about, again, going to the human aspect of other people and of yours, or think differently of yourself, right?
Does it collect data from other users to merge it with your data, or is it okay?
It will be individual. Again, the way they claim it is, it comes from your use of the tools, right? And one of the things it does is it has, and I can't remember which one it falls under. It might be collaboration, but it tells you how often you checked your phone during meetings. Right? Yes.
If you have Microsoft,
if you use a Microsoft, you check your Outlook calendar
on your phone,
Outlook mail on your phone while in a meeting, because it has your calendar. It knows you're in a meeting from 1 to 2. So if you check your thing while you're in there, and then it gives you a graph and shows you how often you check your things during meetings. Now, I know there's a flaw on this that we can point out quite quickly, which is, well, what if I have my laptop and we're using that in the meeting? But that's
different.
It's slightly different, I'm sure.
And it's not listening, right? It's a different conversation.
It's a different conversation. But and then it gives you that feedback, and it says, hey, think about the person who organized this meeting and the time and effort they had to put in to prepare for it. Why don't you give them the time that you agreed to give them, so to speak, right? And again, the idea behind it is trying to nudge you a little bit to go, maybe I shouldn't be checking my phone while I'm in a meeting. And it is a little bit frustrating for the person who's organized it. Yeah. And we some great examples of that. Another one was, it tells you how often you accept meeting invites, how quickly you accept them, and how often you attend them, I think it is, something like that. And we chatted to someone one day who, what they said was, I accept 3 meeting invites for the same time, and a minute before the meeting I decide which one to go to. We're kind of, what? Like, just mount up. What do you mean? That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Surely you have to try. And it was only when, again, we kind of had his tool open in front of him, and he seen it, that he went, oh, that's a very low score. It's like, yeah, because you're not treating
respect.
Exactly. You're not treating them with respect, as in you're just deciding in the last minute what one you want to go along to. So again, the idea being, it can't manage that, or sorry, not manage that. It can't measure that, in that it can measure how often you check your phone and give you a figure, but it can't tell you, hey, you've gotten 10% better at knowing you're being nicer to your colleague or respecting your colleague or whatever. Not yet, anyways, that I'm aware of.
Not yet.
Okay. It's the same with the well-being one, right? And I'll finish. You can move on to the next question after this one, I guess. But
no, I was just thinking, because of the well-being, like your definition of well-being is different from mine. Like, we have different scale.
But that's another thing, and that's why you can't define it. There's certain words that we use in here, and well-being is one of them, where I'm like, I've read, I'd say, 1,000 definitions on well-being, and they're all slightly different, which makes it very hard then to go, well, how do we measure?
Yeah, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, right?
Exactly. And the thing with that is, the way this tool, again, Microsoft Viva, I'm not being paid by Microsoft Viva, just better make sure that it just happens to be a tool that we have here. But the way they do well-being is, they look when you use the tool outside of work hours.
Right.
Yeah.
It tracks you that.
Exactly. So you set the tool, you say, I work 9 to 5. And anytime you interact with one of their products outside of that time, you lose a day, right? So it counts well-being days versus non-well-being days or something like that, right? So, and it's only ever 4 weeks at a time. So 28 days, and it will go, in those 28 days, you had 10 well-being days, which means in 18 of those days, you have interacted with one of those products outside of your defined working hours. And the idea, again, to do the nudging side of things is it tells you, hey, by disconnecting from work, you actually will be more productive versus just doing work. Because we know we burn out, as in, if you try and do the same thing, or if you try and work, you will burn out. Your mind, you might still be there in body, but your mind will be tired, and you won't be as productive as if you actually step away from the tool and from your work. And that's what the tool tries to do, is tries to
help you.
Exactly. It says, hey, we've collected some of this data and we're going to try and frame it so that it makes sense to you. So, hey, you've had 10 well-being days and 18 non-well-being days. And then it'll have a little nudge like, if you switch off from work, it'll allow you to recuperate, which will allow you to work more productively.
Right.
So the idea there it touches back into that humanistic management idea, which is rather than just burning yourself out, do things.
So how far do you think New Zealand in general are we in adapting to AI?
The one thing, and if I tie it back to this, one thing I would say is, from a well-being perspective, New Zealand I think are definitely on the right track in terms of how that fits into our lives, our working lives and our personal lives. It seems to be something that we do talk about, and people are aware of, and you're kind of just hoping that gets better, right? In terms of using these tools for that aspect, no.
We're behind.
Not many people. The only people who are kind of using it are people who saw it and went, that's interesting. Again, people that we've interviewed are generally people who've seen that digestive email at some stage as well and went, I can fit this into my work, and this makes sense to me. I can use some of the data to look at my well-being days. Or another one that they have there is the collaboration tool, which is how often you interact with different people. And the idea being, hey, you normally work a lot with Lloyd, why don't you send him another email, or why don't you contact him and see how he's getting on, or whatever it actually is. But again, most people only use it if they see, this is something
Interesting.
interesting. And basically how we started that study. But from the bigger perspective of using Gen AI and stuff like that, I don't know. The reason I don't know is I've not seen any kind of statistics or any, but most people I talk to, or a lot of people I talk to,
They're using. So probably it's helping them in one way or another.
yes.
Okay. What's the biggest challenge that you are having when it comes to doing a research about AI? What's the biggest challenge you're seeing?
There's probably two challenges, right? Two main ones. The first one might sound a little bit funny, seeing as we spoke a lot about ethics. Human ethics, to do any study here at Victoria, and I'd imagine all universities in New Zealand, you need human ethics to get that. And the minute you mention anything about AI, it has people going, what exactly are you going to be doing? So in other words, what kind of information or data are you going to gather for your study to do it? So that'd be from an internal perspective. Is human ethics around AI can be a little bit challenging at times. The other one, I'm applying this, I guess, to that transparency project that I spoke a little bit about. Is it'll be interesting to see how honest people are.
Don't use that to me.
Well, you may have noticed it, but when the recorder is turned off, people tend to tell you stuff, right? I use it for this. I use it for
When I turn it on, like,
what I have no recollection of what you're referencing there is what tends to happen. So it'll be interesting. I think that they're the two interesting questions about that project. The first one being how truthful people are about using it and what they're using it for, right? Because I ask, as I said earlier, I ask everyone, do you use it? What do you use it for? Oh, and generally the response is, oh yeah, it's great. I can get it to do this, or I get it to do that, and so on and so forth. But I think the other interesting one is that might be a challenge is organizations' perspective on it, right? Because I'm sure organizations had the same response that we had, which was, we have to shut this down and do not, like the one where I said students back into the classroom or into this hall to do their tests, right? I'm sure organizations had a view of
no phones allowed.
Exactly. Just going, the way around this is to lock it down and say you're not allowed to use it, blah 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 blah. And then the other one is the term I use for it, and I've not written this, and it's a term that I spotted once ever, and it must be about 10 years ago now. And it was called grassroots information systems, right? And it's this idea that, and it was used for social media actually. So organizations didn't adopt social media, but people within organizations adopted social media, and it kind of grew upwards, right? As opposed to top down. And I think things like Gen AI is something similar. It almost goes up in terms of individuals are using it, some seeing value, some not seeing value, but
Since everyone is
using it, it will start to proliferate, and then all of a sudden organizations have to react and go, oh, okay, this is interesting. And that's why it'll be interesting to kind of see what policy is written around its use, and kind of what you are allowed to do versus what you're not allowed to do, and then comparing that to what people are doing.
And we're not yet into that space wherein government's looking at policies, right? Given we have AI, people using AI and stuff now in New Zealand, and obviously there will be a lot of things that are going to be written by AI, not just blogs, not just, I don't know, maybe they're looking into legislation writing. Are they going to write policies around it that they're not allowed to use AI when it comes to legislations and stuff like that?
That's what I mean. That's the policy I want. I'd love to understand is, are you allowed to use it? And then that goes back to what I said earlier versus, I think saying you're not allowed to use it is setting you up for potential failure just because people are using it. Right. And it goes back to what I said earlier about those kind of workarounds, which is, I'll just go home and do it on my home computer. And then that's where risk comes into it then, is because what you're putting into it, you don't know what impact that's going to have.
So it's like phones are available, but you're not allowed to use phones kind of idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what I've seen in other places is you have a work phone and a work laptop, and they prevent you from accessing
work.
Yeah, exactly. They prevent you from accessing these tools.
Yeah.
I have a home laptop.
Yeah.
I can do it on that.
And you're not going to be monitored unless you log into Microsoft, obviously. But you can write something on a Word document. I'm probably giving them an idea.
Yeah, I hope they're not listening. But yeah, you could
workarounds.
There are workarounds, and that's why it's important to create policy around what's expected, and back to that idea of teaching people of what you should and shouldn't do with those tools.
Right. It looks to me now that phones were never one of the basic human needs, but after we progress, this is now a human need, like, right? It's like food. Now it sounds to me like AI is going to go or head into that path, like it's a human need now.
Maybe. And again, I kind of go back to what I said earlier about the mirror. Idea,
mirror.
right?
Yeah, I remember.
And that idea that, sorry, no, that I keep saying the same thing.
No,
But
it's okay.
kind of
Yeah.
we'll end up in the middle somewhere of, hopefully we don't lose that creative aspect to what makes us human. But I also wouldn't have an issue if it replaced what I would say are boring tasks, both at a work thing and a personal thing. And like, as we said, I love driving cars, right? I love driving a car. I know that sounds absolutely incredibly boring, right?
For some, maybe.
For some, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But I enjoy driving around the place. It doesn't bother me. But if someone said to me, "Hey, you can do other things while I do this driving, and it's 100% safe,"
Or you have a paper you're working on right now. And
that's what I mean. What ends up happening is, if you're on a train, yeah, I'll sit there and do work, or I'll sit there and watch a movie, whatever it is that I want to do. Same idea. If someone said to you, "We can automate that task. Do you want us to do it?" But I go back to what we say here, which is that automation of humanistic outcomes, is that right? And I think you raised a great question or a great point earlier where you kind of said, does that mean we start to lose some of the things that make us human, right? Which is, hey, I'm not really thinking about you or anyone. I just clicked a button that allowed it to send emails at 9 a.m. instead of 8 p.m. at night. I still need you to do the work. I still expect a response from you. Do we start to lose some of that? Maybe.
right.
Maybe not.
But it depends on the individual, I think.
But that's the thing. It depends on the individuals. Maybe if you get more time to do things, you become more creative with other things. You know, you can finally learn guitar that you always wanted to learn, or whatever the thing is. It'll probably come down to, I mean, most of us would probably just go watch Netflix for a while or something like that. You know, exactly. I'm a YouTuber, is what I do. I watch YouTube instead of Netflix. I don't meet too many people who are like that. Actually, most people think, "What? You have a YouTube subscription? Are you crazy?"
Oh, okay. But it's a thing for others, right?
It's for me. Yeah, I do. But others, yeah, Netflix is their thing. But yeah, I don't know. Do we start to lose some of that humanness or humanistic?
I think like you have written a song, like you have the lyrics now. Maybe you can start experiencing playing the guitar, but you haven't written the lyrics, but it's not part of what you have experienced. I don't know. It's still a question mark for me. Like if you're an artist, a painter, maybe do a painting of, I don't know, the next Mona Lisa.
Yeah, right. So I know we spoke at the start about ethics, and I kind of spoke about we shouldn't be using ChatGPT, right? But if we come down a level from that, it's very interesting to talk about the art side of things, right? And the reason is, it seems artists are definitely not happy with it, and so on and so forth, and I think they make a good argument as to why that is. But often when you talk to artists, they talk about the process is what is the thing they enjoy. The outcome just happens to be the song or the image or the picture, whatever it is, right? And they love the process. Do you know the struggle I needed to get to that point? And that's fair. It's very good. The kind of flip side of that is someone like me who is not creative. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't write music, whatever it is. By having a tool like that, it opens up the opportunity for me to be able to do it, right? Which is, hey, I can go to one of these sites that allow me to create images, and based on my maybe I can think about it and I can prompt and I can prompt and get some feedback and prompt and get some feedback and start creating. All of a sudden, maybe I can create an image that I didn't physically draw because I can't do it, but I have an idea for an image that I would love to try and. So a flipped coin of some of that argument is maybe these tools can help with. And again, I guess we're talking about different levels of creativity, but it can open up doors to people who aren't like myself, who aren't so good at drawing or writing songs or whatever it is.
I'm now opening a debate in terms of you writing your own album. I wrote my album. You automated your album. I've written my album, and you made more money than.
Unfortunately, the Beatles will still be around, so I won't be making any money either.
Wow.
But it's fascinating. And again, that's probably a whole area for another discussion. Again, like there's a lot there.
Yeah. Any imparting message in terms of like for us to be able to accept that it's here? There's nothing we can do. Acceptance is the first step.
Exactly. Yeah. Now the one I always do, and I know this might go against some of the stuff at the start, but the thing I always encourage my students to do is click buttons, right?
Regardless if it destroys anything.
Well, that's part of it, trying to work out what it can do and can't do, right? And I say it to my students all the time, because we did one of those first classes about an information system, and I say, whenever I see a new system, the first thing I try and do is break it. Right? The first thing I do is try and work a way around it. And to give you a good example of that, I remember years ago, I used to love Reddit. I still love Reddit, but I used to go to do a lot of Redditing. And someone mentioned to me about this this app that you can download, and you can limit how long it'll allow you to stay on Reddit, right? And I thought, finally a solution to my problem, I'll be more productive. And download it, installed it, and set it 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day or whatever it was. And then I found myself going, how can I break it? How can I get around what this thing is trying to, the thing I've installed myself, how can I get around its restrictions? And within 5 minutes I worked out, if I go into incognito mode, it stops tracking, therefore I can still go to reddit.com and log in and do my thing, right? A way around the system. Right? And that's what I kind of say to my students as well, is press buttons, see what it can do, see what it can't do, see how you can kind of get around what you think it does do. And that's how you learn. You learn those things by doing them, and then you might learn that, hey, it turns out ChatGPT isn't great at writing songs, or it turns out I can express my way differently through this thing because the way I say something isn't as good, or whatever it might actually be. And to that is build upon what you're getting back from it, as in, don't go in and go, it doesn't do anything and I'll move on, or the one I always say is break buttons, or break buttons, press buttons and break things. And like another example of that one is the funniest one is at airports. And airports require you to often just enter your email address, so it can, it doesn't even send you an email, but it does something to you. And my programming students, I kind of said, well, what's a way around this, and generally you get blank faces. And I'm like, yeah, but we were just talking about validation, and I kind of say, all that box is saying is, I need something that looks like an email address, right? They're not sending you a link to confirm it's you. They're just saying, hey, I need an email address. Make up an email. We know what an email address looks like. It has words, it has an @ sign, it has something .ie or .com or .co.nz, whatever it is. So like I always just use meme at meme.com, right? And what's funny is, as time has gone on, some of these systems start going, it's not a real email address. I said, grand. And I just play around with, how can I change it enough to make it come across as that's a legitimate email? We can let you have access to the internet. And that's another example of press buttons. Think about what it's actually asking you and see how you can get around it. See, can you break? And I know it sounds funny saying break it, but it's how you learn, it's how you, and it's the same with these Gen AIs. If you're thinking about the humanistic aspect, hey, what does it mean for me to follow Microsoft Viva and follow the instructions that they kind of give me, or not the instructions, but the kind of feedback based on the data it has on me. Same with something like Grammarly. Yeah, play with it. See where it fits in. You'll find for some tasks, they're brilliant. For other tasks, not so good. Make sure you look at, if you're in an organization, the policy they have around it, obviously. But yeah, play with it. Press buttons. See what it kind of says to you.
Yeah, as long as it's not a bomb.
Yeah, like, don't need to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But like in terms of your
Okay.
work and your even your home stuff, yeah, see what it can do for you.
All right. Thank you for your time. I know we've over time. I really appreciate that.
That's absolutely fine. I didn't know we had the time.
Yeah. No, I'm not timing, but sometimes if I love the conversation, I still have lots of questions, but that's gonna be on a separate conversation, I guess. Thank you, and I
problem.
appreciate your time.